We are going to be joined today by Gizo van der Heide, who is our special guest, and I'm very privileged to have you on the show, Gizo. And just for the little history behind this, Gizo and I met 3 years ago, I think it was, at an event in Munich, which was organized by Siemens, and
Right.
where we were helping your team at Siemens to put different things into place around customer success. It was a great event. So, you know, over a few glasses of pills and everything, it went down very well, didn't it? I remember. So that was good. And what we'll do is we'll be presenting to you this framework, which we were talking about with Gizo and the team at Siemens, called the AMPM, and we'll tell you more about that later. And at the end, so we'll have 5 minutes at the end. So Jason here will be consolidating your questions and some of your comments, and then we can select 2 or 3 questions at the end, something like that. So that's what we're going to do. So over to you, Gizo, please, to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. And I'm very delighted that you invited me for this webcast. Like I said, I really love to share knowledge around things we implement. So I'm very from practicality as well, right? You can talk a lot around theory, but I want to apply stuff in the market. So my role is senior manager in the strategy and operations team at Siemens. I am based out of the Netherlands. I live near Amsterdam. Most people are familiar with Amsterdam, but in a very forestal area, so not downtown. I started 3 years ago at Siemens in a success organization. Actually, you know, to be honest, the maturity was almost zero. No processes, no standards, a small team. And that's where I said, give it a start. So one of the things I took was the AMPM framework, which I'm going to talk about. On the other hand, people are, I think, familiar with Siemens. I think everybody knows Siemens, right? We're a global company, 320,000 people with revenue about 78 billion on an annual base. Our division, because we have multiple divisions in Siemens, our division resides on the digital industries. We are the software division, DISW, and that's where we are having implemented customer success. So with around 5 billion on revenue, and one of that part is 1 billion ARR, and we kind of in a transformation of that business into full-blown ARR. Obviously, we serve around 80,000 customers, and another thing to mention, 24,000 people in our unit, and we grow actually our organization from 20 people 3 years ago now to 60. So we're kind of, let's say, tripling, almost doubling every time we grow. So that's one thing. A little bit slide on myself. People that are familiar with me already know me that I'm a long time in business. You know, I'm already a great guy, but at 25 years plus, I have a lot of capabilities being built. Like I said, theory and practical. I like to implement and get things going. One of the things I want to mention, I contributed to a book in 2022, Innovation in Construction, about business model innovation, and very interesting to read, I hope. And I think that's a great hook back to you, Sue, because we also have something in common of writing a book, right?
Absolutely, and I'm really honored and privileged to be writing this with you. So just to give people a little overview, so it's a book obviously about customer success, but it's very much focused on how to translate frameworks around customer success, such as this AMPM, which we're going to be talking about, and how to translate it into real practical hands-on implementation. So that's just kind of an overview of the book. And I'm really excited to be co-authoring this book with you, Gizo. So it's fantastic. So thank you for that introduction. So what I will do is just get into the subject. So the subject really is about how to measure value for customers. And it is right now, it's a very topical subject. It's a recurring subject in the world of customer success. Ironically, it's a subject which I think a lot of customer success professionals and groups are still burying their heads in the sands, right? Because I think a lot of the time we've been very much wrapped up around different kinds of leading indicators, different kinds of metrics, which probably are not pertinent, right? So I think the first thing that we should be aware of as we're trying to sell, particularly in the world of software, or as in Siemens' case, you know, you're transitioning right now, as you mentioned, is that we're no longer just selling products. That was a thing of yesterday. but we're actually selling outcomes. And that's something which is a change of mindset, a change of mentality, and a change of way of doing business. That's what customers are expecting of us. If we can do this, this then becomes a real differentiator from a competitive point of view, because not a lot of companies are doing this. Certainly your competitors are not necessarily doing this. And as a result, it means that customers are actually achieving their outcomes, achieving some kind of business performance. And that means they're obviously going to want to stay around with you longer. And this is introducing this really important notion. We often hear the term leading indicator, lagging indicator. So just very briefly, a leading indicator is something which is going to influence and kind of predict what is going to happen in the future, whereas a lagging indicator is something which reports on past performance. So I think we're mixing these leading and lagging indicators up a lot in the world of customer success. And what we have as an opportunity in the world of customer success is to start using values which are measured by our customers, tangible values, as the leading indicator for the vendor growth. This is not happening in the world of customer success today, because we're too much focused on what I call belly button metrics, which are metrics which are very focused on whether or not we as a vendor are growing, right? So if you think about, first of all, are your customers growing? Consequently, this will be a leading indicator to predict whether you as a vendor will also grow. So that's just kind of an introduction. And this is the framework. So we call it AMPM. So it's an acronym meaning activity measurement and performance measurement. So basically, I was just talking about the leading and lagging indicators. The activity measurements are the leading end indicators which are going to be asking your customers to measure in order to achieve their performance goals. So the performance measurements are the lagging indicators of your customers. The activity measurements, sometimes in certain contexts, and I know it's the case with Siemens, Giza, and you're going to walk us through that. This term activity measurement also is used in terms of adoption measurement. So we're using measurements around the adoption of the tool, but also other things as well. So this is really what you as a vendor and a customer success professional should get your stakeholders, get your users to do and to measure in order to reach goals. And the performance measurements, well, this is what they really care about, because this is going to help them achieve their business objectives, right? So this AMPM framework, it can be used and in different kinds of granularity. So it can be used, as we can see here, per persona. So what types of personas are using your tool. It can be used on a segmentation based on jobs to be done. I know that Giza are going to be talking about this. It can be used in segments. It can be used in verticals. And it could even be used across different milestones across the customer journey. So this framework, this in fact a framework which I put into place 15 years ago when I was a change management consultant in software and observed the flop of CRM deployments back then and even now to a certain extent. And that's why I put in this framework so we could have some measurable outcomes for the users of CRM. Since then, we've adapted this to customer success, and it can be applied to obviously any kind of platform, any kind of vertical. So that's just for the history. Now, today in the world of customer success, a lot of the time, our focus is very much on the adoption of the tool. Those are the main metrics which we're using today to try and have some kind of indication of whether the customer is likely to stay or leave. Those tool adoption metrics, for me, are only the visible part of the iceberg. But for me, it's not the main focus of where we can really create impact in the world of customer success. But it's the easy part. Why? It's because those are the only possible metrics which we're sharing today between the vendor and the customer. Those are the only things that we can share. What's really important is the submerged part of the iceberg. And here we can see things which are being done, which are, I would say, more human focused. The top is the tool and the bottom are the human focused things which everybody is doing in business as usual. And these are the things which we are not measuring, and we're not necessarily asking our customers to measure. So these things are based around organization, based around the people, the culture, the process, the jobs to be done, the data, all these really interesting things. And these are the things which, if we can really understand how our customers are actually operating on a daily basis, this is where we can help move the needle. So this is why the AMPM is really important, because it focuses on these human aspects, which we can see here at the bottom. And this is where customer success can have a greater impact. Now, you're probably familiar with this very famous quote from Theodore Levitt, which is, people don't want to buy a 1/4-inch drill, they want to buy a 1/4-inch hole, right? So, okay, this is fair enough, because it's true that, it's not just the drill which is important. But for me, the hole is not, in fact, the outcome. The hole in the wall is an activity. So this is like a job to be done. It's to drill a hole in the wall, right? The real outcome is the performance outcome, and that's what we're looking for. And that is admiring the picture on the wall after we've drilled the hole, right? I don't know about you, Giza, but I don't get very excited about drilling holes in walls, yeah?
I've recently done a lot in my new house, but
So just to give a very tangible example, a lot of the times when we're asking our customers, okay, what they want to achieve, they'll probably say something which is quite wishy-washy, like, well, we need to have a higher conversion rate, we need to increase revenues. That's, it's not very tangible. So what we're looking for is to have something tangible. Let's suppose that we are in MarTech, and we are a MarTech marketing persona, for example. Then the tangible outcome would be, for example, I want to increase my MQL to SQL conversion rate from 10% to 13% by the end of the year. That is a very tangible performance outcome. How do we get there? How we get the customers to get there? So this is just an example, an extract. We have this persona, the marketing manager. In the middle, we can see the performance metric. Around in satellite, you can see, as a customer success professional, these are the kind of things which we could be recommending them to do. And you can see we're not just recommending them to do things based on the tool in pink, but also other things like organization, process, behavior, all those things we just saw at the bottom of the iceberg. So here, just to go very quickly, organization, you could say, right, in order to get to that objective of performance, you need to dedicate a full-time person. In terms of process, what you need to be putting into place is increase the social media engagement by 50%. From a tool perspective, we could say, yes, increase the number of identified weekly contacts by plus 50%. That is something which you can certainly measure in the tool and share between the vendor and the customer. Okay, so you get the gist. And what happens is, with this framework, you end up with a catalog of different kinds of performance metrics which are possible for the personas or the verticals or the segments or whatever. And you have, in relation to this catalog of performance metrics, activity metrics, which can be selectable. And again, they can be defined based on the customer context. So it's not always the same activity metrics which you're going to recommend your customer to use. It's up to you, and that's where your added value comes in, based on your knowledge of their context, right? So that's just an example. And here are just a few more examples, because obviously when you're trying to get your customers to reach some kind of performance goals, you have to think about what is realistically achievable in the long term and what is realistically achievable in the short term. So here we just got a few examples of long-term and short-term performance goals for this marketing manager. So a long-term example would be, okay, I can only improve the campaign ROI after 6 months or 9 months of being subscribed to your tool. I can only really generate significant lead generation after 10 months of being subscribed with your tool. The short-term performance examples, these are things which you could probably propose to your customer to achieve probably a few months after they've subscribed. It could be, in some cases, after their onboarding experience. So what you need to do is really understand your customers' processes inside out and help your customers prioritize their processes, prioritize their organizations, and to achieve realistic performance metrics all along the customer journey. So here, this represents the customer journey. Usually what happens is we should be getting salespeople up front to really verbalize with the customer what are those short-term and long-term performance metrics. They should be put into the success plan, for example, with some kind of value selling methodology. And then what we'll be doing is setting these metrics as milestones to track throughout the customer journey, throughout the success plan and the business reviews. So that's just like the stage setting. And now, Gizo, I'm going to leave it up to you to show us how you've put this into place at Siemens, please.
Yeah, that's a whole story, right? And I only have like 50 minutes, but I'm happy to share with the audience what we've done. I mean, there's a philosophy behind. I think everybody's kind of already known about the topic. Hey, value selling has to be done earlier. So the earlier we can get customers into that mode, the better we can drive it downstream. That's one thing. We also see, let's say, that when we help customers grow their business, they see really tangible value. Not only a tool is adopted, but the process is changed. And they see business value coming out of this. This is, of course, also an element to reconsider. So once you have a good customer referring, it's also helping finally to grow your area, right? Good customers help you to advocate. So if you go to the next slide. So what we have done, so there are two things. I took, let's say, the AMPM framework as part of a sub-framework of an overarching framework I have built. One of the key things I call it success architecture. I think it's not trademarked yet, but I call it success architecture. And we have a couple of components put in place. So we speak about value streams. So we need to understand what value means, right? What is functional value, emotional value? Probably people are familiar with the value tree of being a company. That's what we apply is there as one of the components of the framework. The other one is jobs to be done. We just spoke about it. What are customers trying to achieve to make them happy and good looking for their boss into their own company, right? It's not a tool, but find what they try to achieve. What I won't speak about today is governance, but if you have a success architecture, you need to have governance and control, right? Because we're speaking about the kind of process, the journey life cycle that we need to start controlling. I won't speak about that. Then with AMPM, that's the framework Sue was speaking about. So we changed a little bit around activity into adoption metrics. So for our CSMs is adoption and performance metrics, all fine. I will show you later on. And we have an adoption framework. So you need to get stuff done, execution, that can be service engagement, support engagement, whatever, to go from A to B to C to Z. So we have a 60 plus adoption framework, 60 plus tactics adoption framework ready. Maybe for next time, so we can speak about this, but this is supporting our execution of the success plan. Prescriptive, right? And another thing is adoption, by BI, intelligence. We need to show customers progress. So we try to report out the best we can. Where are we moving the needle? And I'll show you later how we use it into the quarterly business reviews. So maybe one thing if you go now if you go to the next slide, basically this is the recap of it. Sorry, one up. So.
This one.
Yeah. So the benefits of having a success architecture is that customers can speak about tangible outcomes, the whole value discussion, right? You can benchmark value. As we're capturing value for certain industries or certain processes, we can capture and we can compare. So you can benchmark, which is also value bringing to the customer, right? It's scalable. The framework is scalable. You can change components with maybe improved components, new industry insights, whatever you want. With governance in place in the framework, finally also, we are now thinking about once it's running, we start enabling the digital journeys. So the self-serving type of view where customers go to a website and start designing their own outcomes based out of a prescriptive framework, because that's what we're speaking about. And we also see later on, I speak about influencing or embedding industry standards. If you don't have this correct, like an architecture, you will fail in a certain moment of time. So we had to really thought through the past 2 years at Siemens and also practicing those key elements with customers to see what's the reflection, how is it received, etc. I finally put everything in place as the status is now, as you can see by now. Next slide, please. Fundamental pieces around going into jobs to be done. One of the key things we have learned, speaking the language of customer at the level of the process, is speaking about minimize. We always say, hey, you want to minimize time, amount, or you want to minimize cost, or likelihood, or an effort, whatever. Minimize already brings you into that discussion with that job executor or that persona in that process. Hey, I want to minimize certain cycle times. We want to show them that we're moving the needle, minimize. It's come from the jobs to be done. It's a very valuable statement on how you describe value. One of the examples here, a product manager, I want to minimize the launch, finally the dates of the new products, so I can meet my committed budgets, which is finally the jobs to be done, right? That's their final thing they want to achieve. And you can have even sub-processes where other personas start executing and have a similar formulation. So this is formulating basically value to customer side, because I see too much in the industry speak about, yeah, you need to bring value, realize value. For me, it's just a black box, but we need to structure this framework the way we formulate. Next slide, please.
Yes.
So this is one of the areas in the template we have in the success planning. So we work very closely with the full account team on bringing pieces of information in. Basically, on the left side, we describe what a certain persona has to do. You see what you say, I want to achieve something, performance metric, so that I can do. It's finally, it's a job to be done. It has an outcome. And finally, also ask what's the influence in your organization. It will hit 150 engineers, whatever. The way we formulate is easy to read for the teams. How we also finally communicate with the customers during business reviews. This is the core data we go along. You see also processes attached. In our industry, we need to speak about processes, not function feature, right? We need to speak about process. So we can bring in the process elements that are being hit or should be improved, and also the solutions we plug in. The key crucial learning is here, value first, solution later, and not the other way around, because that's happening too much in industry. We try to push to sell solutions. A recurring business industry or recurring business models where we speak about, you have to start with value, bring the solution, and finally go into those kind of loops. That's the key. And this is already a huge challenge of going through this change management also in our organization to change that kind of route. Okay. Next slide, please.
I love that. And I love what you were saying, because processes are really key here, because that's what we're focusing on. So just very quickly to explain that APQC, because that's interesting, because that's an industry standard, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So APQC, you might see it here at the business process level. The best thing is when you standardize the stuff, right? Because becoming prescriptive, you need to standardize as much as possible. Mm-hmm. So our process structures are around APQC. It's an open organization around the standardization of business processes cross industry. You can go to the website apqc.org. You can find a lot of information. It's really coded down from a process group level to a task level. So very prescriptive, and it also can help you in driving the discussion what customers are looking for. Okay.
Yeah, and it's cross industry, so it's really helpful.
Cross industry. Yeah. Next slide, please.
Do you want this before? Can you see the performance metrics?
Yeah, I can see it. But just a quick heads up. So if you go to this APQC organization, they also have 2,500 metrics to certain parts of the process. So we populate those in our, I call it database. Mm-hmm. This is just an overview of a huge set we have. And the more prescriptive you can be, the earlier you can bring those metrics to the customer. Say, hey, this is what we're looking for. This is, let's say, the benchmark. What do you try to fill in? You know, what's your starting point? What's finally your goal? So that kind of discussion very early in the sales process, that's a crucial way of rethinking. Mm-hmm. Next slide, please.
Yes.
And of course, we spoke about PM, but this is the AM side, right? We have to look into data and data sources, how customers are adopting our technology and our solutions. So one of the key things you see at the top left is active users, very common in success industry. Other areas of time to value, also very much mistaken, because we distinguish between first active user and time to value, which is much later down the line.
Yeah.
Right? Where we really start hitting the process and people acknowledge, they are moving the needle and minimize something. I'll show you later on how we monitor this. One key other area in the metric is the value perception score and job perception score. It's introduced by Yusu a while ago. We're working on it together. It's a new way of looking more customer-centric to what the people value on engaging with you. So it's not just a net promoter score or a satisfaction score about that product. It's more going up the level of that value discussion we had, right? And what's the score in it? It looks a little bit like NPS. And so you mentioned maybe next webcast around this topic. Absolutely. I think it's very interesting. We'll start thinking about this, introducing this. It's a new way of thinking. I love it. Okay.
Thank you.
Next slide, please.
Can you see
So
this?
what we've done, just to give you a little bit about our interface. So one of the things is to make lives easier. So what we have configurators, and what you see is a configurator interface. I just put my headshot in, but you can bring a customer or a certain persona you want to have. But it's basically reflecting that former slide you saw, describing that value statement, that value expectation. We describe it and we can pull it from a database. Two things. If pre-sales in our side does a good job, they already collected this information and we just automatically flush it in, right? We're working now on an interface of doing that. If not, we still can have the discussion of, pulling down lists and refine those. And again, I refer to the APQC. We see the process part. We just can drill down from a list of standardized processes. The more you standardize, the better you're set up for the future. Okay.
Yeah. So that's your success plan. So that's great. Next slide.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is one of the key things. So this is eye-opener, not only for you, I hope, for people inside Siemens a while ago, but also for customers. So what we show here is that we're collecting data. Everybody speaks today about data, and data is a new gold, whatever, but you need to structure data first. So we structure data around adoption metrics, I showed you, and performance metrics. And basically what we've chosen, when customers have selected a set, we start reporting those. So adoption metrics we pull from our systems. Performance metric has to come from customer, obviously, because they are working in the process and they have to provide it. If you at the early bought into success planning and value realization, they will start giving you those numbers. If not, if they think you just want to sell more solutions, they won't give you those numbers. So again, it should happen early in that stage of the process. Yeah. So while we go further along, we can see also that in the time. Sorry, one back, Sue.
Yes.
We also see time to value milestones. So we align with the customer. What is the first milestone you want to hit a certain adoption metric or a certain performance metric? The first time to value you see here is that, let's say, users are in the system, but the process is not approved yet. That's the blue line that goes down, and design cycle times are still kind of same. Mm-hmm. If we go 6 months down the line, we see active users going up, and also, let's say, the process is improving. We see, let's say, cycle times go down. Okay, so that's another perspective of capturing data. This will be used in business reviews, right? Yeah. So if you go to the next slide, and that's also my final slide. So this is almost the final slide. So with adoption, performance metric reporting and data capture, this is also looking at the maturity of the organization capability. Too often companies are only looking at technical maturity or process maturity. This is all in. It's from KPMG, the model. I really love it. And it's about the capability maturity of organization. For very low maturity, finally, to, let's say, a high level of, finally, let's say, continuously improving that part of process or that part, let's say, of the organization. We use this also to measure maturities inside the company.
Absolutely. Okay. And we can probably come to that with the questions afterwards, Giso.
Yeah. That's my final slide. This is one of the slides we use for business QBR, quarterly business reviews or annual business review, doesn't matter. It's the way you replay back the information to customers, what you have agreed in the success plan. It's not just a business review where you go to all the troubles or to the commercials. It's really going back to the success plan. Where are we in moving the needle? So referring back here, let's say, to that same kind of setup of that persona and the value realization, you see down below there's a kind of already value capture around the quote. Emotional value, we want to capture also the scores, the value perception score, for example. So we have involved in here. On the other side, you see more the maturity of those process components, how they are being matured inside the organization. And down below, you just saw the graph of how we are doing with, let's say, our adoption and the performance metrics inside of the customer. This, what you see, is key crucial information. And the earlier you do, the better you can capture, the more guarantee you have of customer. Obviously, start going to renew and asking for more, right? What's the next step? What's the next part of the CSP, etc., etc. So
I love the way you captured all this. It's amazing on just such a succinct slide, Giso. I love this, of all this pertinent data.
Right. So this was my last slide. So it was pretty quick. I could tell hours about success planning. I'm very passionate about it. But I give it back to you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that brilliant presentation. I think it's so insightful. And obviously, I know that this is work in progress and this takes time to put into place. So thanks for doing all that. what I would love to do now is go back to Jason, because I'm sure there are lots of questions which the participants have. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Actually, there normally would be a lot of questions, but there have been some technical issues with the comments in the stream here, and I've tried from 3 different machines and have had trouble posting and trouble reading. So unfortunately, I don't have any questions right now. I saw we did have one comment from Ashwin saying it was brilliant, but if others do have questions or comments, now's a great time to put them in. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to Sue or Giso. I've shared their contact information online, or you can also contact us at successchain.net. Sue and Giso, are there typical questions that you usually get from customers that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think what we can do, while we're waiting, perhaps that there might be some questions that people would like to ask. But I think it would be interesting now that you could have some retrospection, Giso, on this. Can you tell us a little bit about, what this value framework, the AMPM, how it's had a positive impact so far? I know you mentioned the architecture, what you call, I love this terminology, the success architecture, and how that's probably helping you to link.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a great question. I think maybe also the audience wants to hear about it. So, it's not easy. So basically we started from scratch when I joined Siemens about this concept, right? And putting concepts in place, people are afraid, right? There's something new and you will fail or this kind of thing. So a key thing around this is change management. So I see now more recognition of change management behind, and I know so you also recently did a webcast around it. Change management around success organization and implementation of that is key crucial. So when you speak about this value component, which is feed in by AMPM, you need to start convincing people what does it bring for us? What's in for us as pre-sales? What's in for us as solution implementation? What's in for us as customers? Because you also need to educate customers on the concept we go after. Because it's not just like a tick in the box, a contract sign is success plan, and then we'll see. It's a key crucial how we work together for the next stage and the next stage. If people don't reckon that, then it's almost set up for failure. And that's why we learned. We've been through, the good things and the bad things. That's where we are. And like I said, thinking in frameworks, and you have this knowledge of bringing at this level, the concepts are being easier to sell to leadership, right? So our leadership is bought in. We now have embedded in our cross process. We are having a new process in place soon in Siemens, which is more go-to-market for recurring business models. This is a beating heart of the things we're going to do. So you see then, whoa, all my passion and all my energy the past years, now it's coming alive, right? It's accelerating. And like I said, it's an inspiration for our book, Sue. So yeah, it's amazing.
I love what you're saying, because I think this is one of the major positive benefits of putting this kind of value framework, such as the AMPM, into place, because I think it helps us break down the traditional silos, which we've already seen in lots of companies. And because the mentality is still thinking about products, technology, right? Absolutely. And if we're thinking about value instead of products and technology, it means, oh my God, everybody's going to benefit from this. So it certainly helps. It helps to break down, because it's an overarching umbrella, isn't it?
It's overarching. You take out the complexity. That's framework thinking. And also the great thing is you're preparing for the future. So we're preparing for the future. And I spoke about it, digital touch. So let's see how we can automate where people are going to do self-service. The more do you want to grow the business, and we want to have more efficiencies. This is how we think. So outcome business, you drive your own service, you drive your own adoption, fully digital guided. And it can be done by AI, because everybody's speaking today about AI. It's possible. We can generate already content in those CSPs driven by AI. No worries. It's on our roadmap. But fundamentally, you have to think about those things. If they're not in place, AI won't change an organization. I mean, from a change management perspective, all still is at your plate. So I think that's one thing. And the other thing is, like I said, the collaboration part, bring teams up to speed around one common thing. Customer centricity is the thing we do. And it's sustainable. So we try to scale it up across the business. So yeah, again, if you don't think at this level, if you don't can't sell this concept and get it into work, and I fake my CSM organization because the CSM doing the work, say this is great, and you have to tweak this a little bit, etc. More agile, bring it to practice, to the field at work. I was myself a CSM, so I know about it. Which is, I think, also brings you trust in the organization, because you know you've been there, done that. Is also an important aspect, right?
Yes, it is.
So,
And I just like to think, because
sorry.
Yeah, so we do have a couple questions if you have a
okay, I
moment,
was
but
going
I'll
to
let you
say,
finish
okay,
it up.
great. Please go ahead, Jason. Yeah.
Yep. So one of the questions that came up is, if I understand correctly, you have a prescriptive metric standardized for your customers. Do you have custom versions for different industries? I think that's a really good question. Do you use the same metrics, or do you customize them for industries?
Correct. You know, and we are mostly, of course, manufacturing. At least, let's say, the biggest part of Siemens manufacturing, healthcare, transportation, whatever. So we're not into retail or consumer goods, right? So we don't have those metrics. But again, if you go, and I advise you, go to apqc.org, subscribe for free. You can download. There's a full-blown Excel. It's released on an annual base with the latest metrics from all the industries. You can filter down by it, and it gives you those 2,500 metrics I was speaking about per industry. If you like, you can filter down and take it from there, right? And collecting the real numbers behind this, of course, I think that's the job, right? How do you get numbers? Again, AI, I think today does a marvelous job. I was really surprised by serving a certain part of the industry asking for certain production numbers or failures. It was almost similar to customers confirming, yes, correct, right? So please also use those two sources in improving your engagements.
Great.
I love that.
Okay, so another comment we have is, thank you for your insights this morning, Stu and Giso. I don't like to think that any customers are ever safe or assure renewal, regardless of how mature the partnership between your company and theirs is. Are there frameworks that you would place more importance on for customers that are already matured with your offerings? So I like that. So if you have customers that are matured with your offerings, are there specific frameworks that you rely on more?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing, right? Because there are many aspects of this. Because we have customers that are already out there for 30 years, and I don't want to call it an interlock, but of course we have an interlock because they produce cars with our solutions, right? And just can stop from one day to the other, say, oh, let's try another one, pull the plug, let's go to the next offering. So that's already, I think, where we have a kind of interlock, I would say. On the other hand, we see a whole supply chain or supply chains that are changing because certain industries are changing. Of course, all electrification. We see a lot of startups. We plug in. The startups say, I want to plug in and go, as you say, right? So we warm them up with industry best practices, the process metrics, but also give them, let's say, almost on the spot solutions, best practices, so they can, directly, let's say, or directly almost generate time to value by coming in. And those companies often have the big budgets, right? Automotive has, and I know automotive now a little bit at pressure, but the big budgets that throw out, let's say, car development, wherever startups are small, they should plug in and should basically, let's say, already directly, immediately receive that value by plugging into Siemens. That's my kind of, philosophy around it. So, but at different aspects, startups, existing companies, we work with partners. We work also, let's say, with SaaS system integrators, how they are part of this whole game. It's not easy to answer. It's a huge complexity we're in. And I love complexity, to be honest.
But what I love about what you're doing in relation to that, Giso, and you mentioned it briefly, is that you're actually administrating an assessment, a maturity assessment for your customers, right? With the 5-step rule.
The 5-step, that's a great question. And also maybe some refinement in here. So what we're trying to do is, and also you have to be quick. You can't come like say, yeah, I'm a consulting company and I do 1-day assessment and I give you this maturity model. You need to be very quick in that piece of process, for example, right? So we are developing now a couple of assessment questions to quickly give them a view on the maturity, the organizational maturity of that piece of process, right? It can be a complete new process, new product introduction.
Okay, I think that's all the questions that we have for today. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Really appreciate it. And Stu, any closing thoughts?
Well, thank you so much, Giso. That was amazing. I love doing this with you. And if for the people who are listening, if they want to get in touch with us, Giso, myself, or Jason, it will be a pleasure to continue the conversation. And thanks again, everyone.